How good are the kills in Halloween 2018? A movie that does a lot of things right. It retconned Busta Rhymes. No! Michael looks like a complete badass, and it's got one of the most exciting and tense endings since the original movie. Smith's Grove Rehabilitation Facility and two FBI podcasters, arrive to interview Michael Myers. Michael's doctor, Dr. Sartain, casually explains that Michael is his life's obsession and then leads the podcasters to him. The two podcasters try to engage Michael, but he doesn't give them the time of day. Aaron tries again to get a response from Michael by revealing his old mask, and when that fails, he resorts to the time-honoured psychological technique of screaming his head off. Say something! Failing to get a rise out of Michael, the podcasters head over to Laurie Strode's house to try and learn new insights on what happened on that night 40 years ago. And we find that Laurie is in a similar state to Michael, behind a shitload of locks. They want Laurie to meet Michael before he's transferred to prison and locked away indefinitely. But seeing how her first encounter with Michael went, she refuses and shows them the door. We then get introduced to Laurie's daughter Karen, who's estranged from her mother after she was taken from Laurie's care at the age of 12. Karen's daughter Allison, however, wants to connect with Laurie, so she invites her out, but Karen lies and says that Laurie can't make it. Fucking Karens. Laurie, who seems to have a lot in common with Sarah Connor these days, hones her shooting skills before later camping outside Smith's Grove. Dr. Sartain accompanies Michael to the transfer bus and sets off. Laurie, who's prepared to kill Michael, is unable to face him and screams in desperation. Later that night, a father and son come across an accident on a deserted road. Mental patients wander aimlessly in the dark, and the man goes to help but quickly disappears. The boy sensibly calls the police, but then unsensibly leaves the car. He comes across an injured officer who tells him to run, but the boy insists on finding his dad. On the abandoned bus, Dr. Sartain suddenly jumps out and the boy lets off a panicked shot. The boy quickly runs back to his car, only to have his neck snapped by an unmasked Michael Myers. Officer Hawkins gets the call out and arrives on the scene, finding a dead guard at the side of the road. Straight after, he finds the boy's father, whose head is facing in an unnatural position. Finally, he searches the bus and finds an injured Dr. Sartain and takes him to hospital. Now, in the background of this scene, you can see another officer here, and we don't really know what happened to the officer that warned the boy who was here. He looked pretty alive at one point, so for the sake of ambiguity, I won't be including these in the count. If we don't see it, we don't need it. The next day is Halloween, and the podcasters are being proper goths, hanging out in Haddonfield Cemetery and checking out Judith Myers' grave. Unfortunately, Michael has also come to pay his respects and spots the podcasters. He follows them to a gas station where Dana goes to use the bathroom. A mysterious man enters after her and proceeds to check the toilet stalls. He reaches a nervous Dana, but then seemingly backs down. Inside, Aaron has more fun and goes to pay for his gas, but instead he finds the attendant dead with his jaw hanging off. An air compressor fires, causing Aaron to spin around and see the garage mechanic lying in a pool of blood and stripped of his mechanic overalls. Back in the toilet, the not-so-mystery man makes a special delivery and tries to open the door. Dana quickly flings herself to the floor and crawls to the next booth, but is grabbed by Michael. She manages to free herself though and quickly locks the door. Aaron bursts in, but he's no match for Michael, who's already leveled up and equipped the mechanic overalls. He smashes Aaron's head to hell on pretty much every vertical surface in the room. Aaron's battered head helps Michael unlock the lavatory door and exposes a defenseless Dana, who's then strangled up against the wall. For a good time, call Michael Myers. Aaron succumbs to his wounds and quickly follows his podcast partner off the face of the earth. I actually liked this whole scene because although I missed it on my first watch, looking back and you can see Michael snooping around in the background, and you can also hear the mechanic being attacked off screen. And let's be honest, it's fucking great when Michael nails the podcasters. Michael meanwhile levels up again, equipping the god-tier mask of ultimate slasher badassery. Laurie catches the news of Michael's escape and heads over to warn Karen, who ignores her and slams the door in her face. Fucking Karens. Night approaches, and amid the joyful trick-or-treaters looms an ominous Michael Myers. He wastes no time grabbing the nearest hammer and test driving it out on a woman's skull. He then reaches max level by swapping the hammer for his trademark kitchen knife. Max level Michael hits the streets again, entering a random house from the back door. He approaches another victim and quickly dispatches her by thrusting his knife through her throat. Meanwhile, at the school's Halloween party, Allison sees her boyfriend Cameron kissing Tony the Tiger. During the ensuing argument, Allison's phone rings and an annoyed Cameron throws it away. Fucking Camerons. Michael never could resist a babysitter and hones in on his next target, Allison's friend Vicky and her boyfriend Dave. In the house, Julian claims he saw a shape upstairs and Vicky goes to check whilst Dave heads outside for a smoke. Perhaps his final smoke. Upstairs, Vicky shuts the closet door, but Michael suddenly bursts out and attacks. She slips in the panic, but Michael drags her back into the room and delivers fatal knife blows. Hawkins and Laurie, who's been monitoring police communications, arrive on the scene. Hawkins goes upstairs and finds the body of Vicky. Boom! Laurie spots Michael from outside and flushes him out of the house. Hawkins, hot in pursuit, stumbles upon the body of Dave, who's been pinned to a wall by a knife. Wow, it's really not Hawkins' night, is it? Michael charges towards Laurie Connor, who gets a shot off but loses him in the dark. Well done. She then heads off to Karen's house to get them to the safety of the Connor fortress and learns that Allison is still out there on the dangerous streets. We then cut nicely to Allison and her friend Oscar. They take a shortcut through a backyard and Oscar makes a move on Allison. Angry at the drunken past, Allison storms off and leaves Oscar rambling at a distant figure who he mistakes for the guy who lives there. The figure is of course Michael, who attacks in a flash. Oscar tries desperately to hop the spiked fence, but his costume is caught, giving Michael the chance to deliver a swift single knife blow to the back. Allison hears Oscar's cries and heads back to find him impaled on the gate spikes. When I was a kid, I always thought something like that would happen to me every time I climbed over a spiked fence. Michael suddenly emerges and a terrified Allison flees. She finds help at a nearby house and Hawkins and Dr. Sartain arrive to pick her up. On their way to the Connor fortress, they spot Michael and Hawkins gets to live out Grand Theft Auto fantasies in real life and hits him vengefully with the squad car. Dr. Sartain runs to Michael's assistance and when Hawkins threatens to finish the job, Sartain stabs Hawkins in the neck and puts on Michael's mask? Yeah, don't worry, we'll be going over this later. He then drags an unconscious Michael into the car with a trapped Allison and drives off to reunite Michael with Laurie, with his goal being to observe Michael in an uncontrolled environment, aka stirring shit up. Allison lies to Sartain and tells him that Michael spoke to her. Desperate to know what Michael said, Sartain stops the car, but Michael awakes and knocks him out. Allison escapes while Michael drags Sartain from the car and curb stomps his head into oblivion. By far the goriest kill of the movie. After an award-winning speech about sandwiches, two patrol officers approach the stationary squad car, but unbeknownst to them are watched by Michael. Back at the fortress, Laurie Connor prepares for the coming battle. Karen's husband Ray spots the arrival of a police car and goes out for a chat. The windows are black and the only light comes from a pumpkin placed eerily in the front seat. The door light suddenly reveals a dead officer who's been stabbed in the skull with Sartain's scalpel. And the pumpkin is actually the grim severed head of the other officer. A stunned Ray is then ambushed by Michael, who strangles him with a chain and then snaps his neck. Now, I thought this was really cool. We know Michael loves to fuck around with his victims, and I think this is one of his best creations. You really think the head is a pumpkin from outside the car, so it's a nice grim little reveal. Ray's gunshot alerts Laurie Connor, who orders Karen into the basement and guards the house with her shotgun. Laurie overlooks an important aspect of security, a solid door, and Michael grabs her, smashes her head, and nearly ends the movie there and then. Laurie does manage to blow a few of Michael's fingers off and narrowly escapes down into the basement. Michael breaks in and Laurie attempts to shoot him through the floorboards, and then she goes up to hunt for Michael anyway, leaving Karen in the basement. Laurie searches each room systematically and then seals it off with shutters, effectively cancelling Michael's MO of silently moving around the house. Upon searching the creepiest room in the house, Laurie follows a trail of blood to a wardrobe. She flings the door open but finds Ray's body instead of Michael. Michael suddenly makes his move and pins Laurie with her gun. She attacks back with a hunting knife, but Michael uses the blade against her. Laurie desperately bites his hand and Michael retaliates by throwing her out of the window. Allison wins the lousy timing award and arrives at the house, alerting Michael. Karen ushers her into the basement, but Michael follows and smashes at the basement door with deafening blows. Karen craftily plays the victim, calling for help, tricking Michael into showing himself, and then she shoots him with ease. Fucking Karens. Laurie appears from the shadows and strikes the injured Myers, and he falls into the basement. Allison and Karen get the fuck out of there, but not before Myers grabs Karen. Now it's Allison's turn to con her up, and she grabs a knife and frees her mother from Michael's grasp. Laurie's cage turns out to be a trap all along, and she activates bars and pumps gas into the basement. The three generations of Strode women stand against the shape. Laurie tosses in a lit flare, igniting the gas. Flames erupt all around, but are ignored by Michael, who stands expressionless in trance. So we've got a ton of off-screen kills here, which is kind of surprising because I don't really remember as many when I first watched it. But it's like my ex-girlfriend used to say, it's not the size of the off-screen kills, it's what you do with them that counts. And I think Halloween 2018 generally makes good use of its off-screen kills. Now let's get to the movie itself. So although it decided to retcon Halloween 2, it still ripped off about half of it. When Michael's on his Haddonfield killing spree, it feels a lot like we're watching a Halloween 2 remake. There's a lot of callbacks to the other movies too, and I think they went a bit overboard in some places. I understand why they decided to ignore part 2 though. The brother and sister plotline has always been a divisive element for the franchise, so it makes sense to start with as clean a slate as possible. But another consequence of sweeping Halloween 2 aside is that it diminishes Dr. Loomis's part. In this timeline, he's now only in one movie, and it kind of negates much of his rivalry with Michael. To replace Loomis, of course, they chose Dr. Sartain. Now, I've always loved the idea of a dark Loomis character, someone who uses increasingly unorthodox and cruel methods in an attempt to understand Michael. But a character like that needs a little bit of development. Halloween fucks this up, and most of the development is relegated to a plot twist that nearly derails the whole movie. Seriously, when I was in the cinema, people were actually laughing when Dr. Sartain donned the mask. I mean, they knew they were going to make a sequel, so why not explore the character a little bit more? Maybe leave the information that he let Michael escape for the second or even the third movie. You know, give the character one of those things. An arc. Laurie seems a bit drastic. So if we remember Laurie from Halloween H2O, she's still related to Michael Myers, so has good reason to believe that he might come after her again. Moving towns and changing names are reasonable steps to take. She also owns a gun, is overly cautious and protective of her son, but at the same time she's trying to lead some sort of life, albeit very secluded. 2018's Laurie Connor, on the other hand, was randomly attacked by a killer who was later caught and locked up. And yeah, sure, that's going to leave some deep scars, but 40 years later, when she's got a bigger gun collection than the NRA, lives in a prison, has a strained relationship with her family, and is a better shot than a T-1000. It's not totally implausible, but it just seems a little bit too extreme. I'm also not in love with the idea of Michael being locked up. I mean, imagine if you saw Jason just sitting around in a prison. Sure, it's possible, I mean, these guys aren't ghosts or anything, but It sure takes something away from them if we see them doing time like regular Joes. Halloween 2018 isn't a terrible movie by any stretch. In a franchise that contains such howlers like resurrection, yeah, it's definitely one of the better movies. The ending is tense and exciting, there's a ton of creative shots and visuals, and I totally respect that they tried to get as close to the source material as possible, bringing in John Carpenter to produce and Nick Castle to don the mask once more. The music fucking rocks, and for the love of all that's gory, they finally nailed that fucking mask, and Michael looks as cool as ever. It also feels like a true Halloween movie and has a great Halloweeny atmosphere. Laurie kind of lets the side down though because she doesn't put up any Halloween decorations. Well, not unless you count these mannequins. I mean, what's the deal? Why doesn't she like Halloween?